3 months it took me to play all of these damn games. 3 months to play and digest everything. Yakuza is an excellent franchise, and just for a bit of fun I've decided to rank them from best to worst. This will not include Yakuza 6 or the PSP games because I haven't played those, and also I have only played each of these games once through. The idea is I make another video in a few years time after 6 is released in English and after I have replayed some of the games, because my opinion seems to be different to those who love this franchise. I will try to keep this as spoiler free as I can regarding the story, but please know that you will probably understand the content in this video a lot better if you are a fan of the series and have also played most of these. Also, please remember, this is my opinion. If you disagree with me, that's fine. Most likely you will disagree with me on this list, but again, that's fine. If anything, I encourage you to disagree with me, to tell me how much of an idiot I am. I'm going to try and talk about each game for under a minute, but you know me, I like to talk. Last thing, so I do not repeat myself, I will say all of these games are excellent, all of these except from one, which I will get to in a minute. All of these games have excellent music, so much so I was able to make a pretty large playlist of all the music in the series that I liked. The link to said playlist is in the description. Also, this guy, Majima, excellent character in every game. Majima is brilliant. This is the only game I struggle to decide whether or not I like it or not. On one side, I thought the game had its moments and had a good concept, and I also thought the characters were very good. On the other, I thought it was an underdeveloped, repetitive, and sometimes boring zombie shooter. There are some fun moments without a doubt, the characters are great fun to play as. One character is just extremely likable. Kazuma, the main protagonist of the series up to this point, is in the game. A returning character from the previous games who happens to be packing a Gatling gun for an arm, and finally Majima, who actually acts like he's really enjoying himself, which makes a refreshing change to all the serious and dramatic zombie shooters where everyone is angry and depressed. But the shooting can get repetitive. It's a bit too easy to screw yourself over and have no weapons. The game can get extremely boring and repetitive at times. The frame rate is tied to the speed of the game, so when the frame rate drops, which happens a lot, the game slows down. The game's checkpoint system is pretty crap as well, especially annoying for an already repetitive game. Overall, I would say this one is for die-hard fans only. It is by far the weakest game in the Yakuza series, not including the PSP games. This is going to surprise a lot of people. I'm pretty sure most people were expecting to see this one at the top of the list. But, I'm sorry. Yakuza 2 is my second least favourite. I did not like this one as much as everyone said, unfortunately. My first problem was the gameplay was not much of a leap from 1. It fixed and tightened and sped up a few things, but it was what Fallout New Vegas was to Fallout 3. I had 3 major problems with this. One of them was a personal preference, but it's still something that bugs me. One is that the boss fights can be extremely cheap at times, especially towards the end. The second problem was that there was so much pointless running around waiting for a virtual clock to tick. I know that in this time the game expects you to do side missions, but it was still annoying that it forced you to do them, especially when the game does not tell you on the map where you need to go. I am going to get banished by the Yakuza community for this last one, but my third problem is that the story did not grab me. Yes, I know, I'm sorry, but I did not find the story particularly interesting or exciting. The main antagonist was awesome though, and the game does have a lot of style, but I did not like this one as much as others said, unfortunately. But as a result, I'm going to give this game a second chance now I've beaten the entire series, and if they remaster it, like they did with the first game, I will definitely replay it. Because I can't deny that this one has some fun moments. I will say the gameplay is much quicker than the first game, and I did enjoy capturing the footage for this. So Yakuza 2 is my least favourite Yakuza in the official timeline, I guess you can call it. But it is by no means a bad game, and that may change upon replaying it. This one did not come out in the West, so some of you watching won't know what this one is. Basically, this is a spin-off set in the 1800s of Japan, or around about that time anyway, with reference to historical Japanese characters. This is one I had to get imported, which, believe it or not, was actually easier and not as expensive as you would think. Very few words in this game are actually displayed in English. This had the same problem I had with Yakuza 2. Instead of it being my brain not following the story, I couldn't get into the story on this one because, well, obviously I couldn't understand the story or the side quests. Which means that I didn't follow what was going on, and I ended up getting bored and unmotivated to run around the city. The cutscenes were also unskippable at times, which means I would sometimes have to sit there for 5 minutes while people spoke in a language I do not understand at this time. This got a higher spot than Yakuza 2 because the combat is obviously a lot better and a lot more refined as the game is newer. Sword combat, which this game focuses on, is not as fun in this formula as hand-to-hand combat, but the combat in this can still be very fun at times, even if the sword play is a bit too slow to my liking, but I think that's down to me getting spoiled by Devil May Cry, etc. If this game got localized, would this get a higher spot? Probably. But for now, I will probably read a text description on the story and see if it sounds interesting. No idea why this one did not get localized, because there's nothing here which would have been frowned upon by the West. And also, releasing this in the West during the time the PS4 was new and didn't have many exclusives, this would have sold well. Oh well. But yes, Yakuza Ishin was held back by the fact it's not in English. This one is also not in English, and is set in the 1600s Edo period of Japan. Honestly, the combat is not as good in this one as there is no upgrade system, so you don't unlock moves over time and slowly make the combat system more complex and strategic. But there is a variety of styles and weapons. But why is this being ranked higher than Ishin? Answer: this one had a much better story that has been fully translated in video form. And it made me enjoy the game a lot more as the motivation and the interest to keep going was there, and it was very high in this game. As you progress, you got more weapons, so you had more ways to fight, and also this one seemed to be a lot more brutal than the previous Yakuza games up to this point, that being 1 and 2, which released before this one. I can actually forgive them for not wanting to release this game in the West, as there is a few plot points which would not have been looked upon fondly here, as it is in reference to something that we not only don't accept, but it's something we are absolutely disgusted by over here. So, fair enough they didn't want to localize this one. But yes, the story is excellent, even though the combat was a bit simplistic at times. Also, I have to say, without ruining anything, the final act in this game, absolutely fantastic. You have probably noticed by now that I have put the games with better stories but weaker combat on higher spots on this list. That is because the games all have similar combat mechanics, so I could go to any one of them if I purely wanted the combat. But these games are RPGs, and RPGs are mostly played for the story. I ended up enjoying the gameplay more if I could follow the story a lot better, as I have context and motivation to keep going. Which is why, even though 2 has better combat than 1, I didn't enjoy it because the story lost me. And while Ishin's combat is far superior to Kenzan's story has been translated and honestly was a lot more intriguing and interesting. Yakuza 1 absolutely has the weakest combat in the series, mainly because the dodge is rubbish, and the lock-on is too loose and is very awkward, and the game can be cheap at times. The camera system was also fixed and cannot be moved at all, which honestly does not work in a game like this. Thankfully the team agreed and changed it later, but still, it's a problem. However, the story is very good in this game. It's really emotional, interesting, and features some of the most likable characters in the series with some really fun moments. It's just a shame that the version we got in the West was dubbed extremely badly. Even with Mark Hamill playing Majima, the dub still sucks. There is a HD remake of this game, but the problem is, It's Japan only, which was a massive missed opportunity by Sega. And the HD remake does fix some of the lock-on issues and some of the dodging issues that it has with this game. So, the only way to play this game now is either with a crappy dub or in Japanese. But if you choose Japanese, you might as well wait for the remaster that they did, which is releasing in English in May, which we will talk about later. Tee-hee-hee-hee-hee. Also, this is a personal preference, but Kazuma looks really off on the PS2 versions in my opinion, compared to how he looks in the later games. If you are wondering why I put this on a higher spot when gameplay is supposed to be the priority instead of the story, well, the HD remake, like I said, does fix some of the issues, and overall the combat does still work and still has a lot of fun moments, even though it has some early development fluff. Annoyingly, the only way to play this version is spending a lot of money to be able to play the digital download. That is if you want it in English. Is it worth it though? Yeah, I would say it is. This one is brilliant. The story is not the best, but it is still good, and the music was not as epic scale as the previous games. The game is very long. Very, very long. There is so much to do, there are so many characters, the story is long and complex, yet still mildly interesting. Not as interesting as the games we'll talk about in a minute, but it was still good. And there are a lot of side missions to do. It's not perfect, there are still some boring moments in there, and some of the content is, well, trash. And the game decides it wants to be an idle-based rhythm game halfway through for some reason. And one character's chapter is basically a reshoot of a chapter from a previous game, which featured a fairly underdeveloped hunting minigame, which you only have to play a couple of times before you don't have to touch it again, thankfully. This one also has one of the best set pieces in the entire series. Without ruining too much, it is basically you versus 100 men at the same time. It is bonkers. The only problem I have with this one are more personal taste related issues. The music wasn't as good, the game was arguably a bit too long, the story was a bit slow at times. Other than that, Yakuza 5, excellent game. This one is a remake of the first game using the engine and assets left over from Yakuza 0. It is brilliant, but it does have some problems. You are insanely underpowered at the start of the game, especially if you are used to Yakuza 0. You don't get the moveset which the main character had in the original version of Yakuza 1 straight away, which also has been completely nerfed until the end of the game after you complete a series of fairly repetitive yet fairly silly and rather enjoyable side missions, which felt like an inside running joke in development where a character is constantly wanting to fight you. I would be lying if I said it wasn't amusing. Really, the only annoying thing about the combat is that the enemies can heal themselves, which can get extremely annoying, especially when they have a lot of health as it is. If I was a critic, I would slam the game for reusing assets and being more of an expansion pack to Yakuza 0 than a proper sequel or HD remake built from the ground up. I would imagine this would rub people the wrong way. This one does release in English in May. If you have not played Yakuza 1 yet, this is the perfect time to give it a try. Just don't expect it to differ too much from Yakuza 0. I debated whether or not to put this game over 4, but after a bit of thinking and reviewing of my notes I made in the last few months, I decided to put this one at number 3. This is the first game I played in the series, which I partly did just as an experiment, just because I felt like trying a new game one day, and it was on the shelf in my local game shop, so I just said screw it. And that was a damn good decision it seems, because 3 is fantastic. The combat was great fun when I first played it, and the music in this one is definitely some of the best in the series. The story was interesting, and I even enjoyed the bits which some fans of the community said were rubbish and outstay its welcome. In a way it kind of does, but as this is an RPG, and this was the first one I played, I really did not mind it one bit. I think I'm always going to have a bit of a soft spot for this game, as it was the first Yakuza game I played, and also it's set in Okinawa, which is a warm tropical location, a bit like the Hawaii of Japan, which I really like seeing in games. But the reason it lost second place is because the game is shorter than most of the other games, and also there were a lot of side missions and content which were cut from the original version of Yakuza 3 during localization. But that did not stop this game from being excellent. This one is basically Yakuza 3 but tighter, more polished, smoother and prettier. They added 3 new characters who you play as, who control and act differently to Kazuma, who we had played as in 4 games technically up to this point. The story is honestly very intriguing, and while it does annoyingly leave some plot points on a sequel hook, I really enjoyed the story. The combat is better, the set pieces were awesome at times, the story got really exciting and intense, the new characters were really fun to play as, except one. Yep, the only problem I have in this one is one of the new characters I did not like. I didn't like him as a character, and I did not like his story arc or his fighting style, as it went against the way you controlled the 3 other characters. But I understand that this is personal preference. The only other minor gripes I have is that they changed some of the world's architecture in the city, and even though we had seen him a lot at this point, I wish Kazuma was involved in this game a little bit more. However, the character I did talk about who I didn't like is only in this game, so I don't need to worry about playing as him again. Also, props for making a character who I disliked in Yakuza 3 extremely likable in Yakuza 4. Here I was thinking only Game of Thrones was capable of such sorcery. I will say I like Yakuza 3's story a tiny bit more, but not enough to get a higher spot than Yakuza 4. And here we are, the one that's freshest in my mind, Yakuza 0. Absolutely excellent game all around. Excellent story with well written and extremely likable characters. Excellent setting and time. Excellent mechanics, excellent minigames, excellent side missions, excellent music, and the combat is the best it's ever been. Majima is a lot of fun to play in this one, and you can tell a lot of effort was put into this game to make it as good as a Yakuza game gets. I would go as far to say this game is a masterpiece. This is the Yakuza formula perfected. Throughout playing through the series, it's either been good story or excellent gameplay, or vice versa. They've fluctuated a lot, but finally with this one I can say both the story and the gameplay are excellent. If you have a PS4, go play this game. I've made a review for it, and it's a prequel, so you don't need any knowledge. Just go out and buy it, it's worth full price, just get this game, it's amazing. What else can I say? And there you go, that's the Yakuza series. I will make a new video when 6 comes out next year, after I have replayed some of these games, and after Kiwami is released in English. Maybe 0 will move from the number 1 spot, maybe 2 will move up, maybe 3 will move down. Who knows? Till then, I will see you later.